time to turn the focus now from toys and fun things to more fun things like apps and entertainment and news consumption. And you know, with all the technologies that we have on display here at CES, it seems that VR is everywhere. I mean, you can't walk down one hall without seeing a virtual reality something or other. And glasses and other tools, they take us into a different world and let us see very, very different things. ABC News VR launched this past fall with correspondent Alexander Marquardt. He brings viewers an inside look at the situation in Damascus, Syria, and I know that you're expanding also into North Korea. And VR just brings a new way to tell a story. It gives the media a chance to transport the audience to a place they haven't been before. And Disney ABC is doing some really cool stuff with that. So I want to introduce Dan Silver, executive producer at ABC News Digital, and Skarpi Hedinsson, CTO of Disney ABC TV Group. And I have a fondness for ABC because, as many of you know, I worked there for many, many, many years. So welcome.
Hi. Thank you.
Hi.
By the way, I've never heard to us being referred to as expanding into North Korea.
Expanding your VR.
Oh, expanding your VR into North Korea.
That's true.
That would be very
Does anyone
unique.
actually expand into North Korea?
I don't know.
Yeah. Expanding your VR
Yes.
applications. Anyway, so Skarpi, you recently got a promotion.
Yes.
Actually, you're doing all kinds of fun things there at ABC. So congratulations to you. You've overseen a lot of change in the digital content space since you arrived. So I wanted to just get your perspective. You know, it's really changed from turning on the Saturday morning cartoons and watching what they have.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get your perspective on that and bring us to the appification of TV.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's been really interesting. We actually, this May is going to be 10 years since we basically started streaming our content online. And, you know, we sort of, as a milestone, you know, I've been talking about, well, what are the next 10 years going to look like, right? And what is the opportunity? You can call it opportunity, disruption. What is the technology advancement that's going to change, and how are we going to use that to tell better stories? And the way I like to describe it is that think about what kind of cell phone you had in your hands 10 years ago. And that was a Motorola flip phone. It was a Nokia phone. It was not a smartphone. The iPhone came out in 2007, the App Store about a year later, right? And so all this advancement, all this innovation that we've seen in mobile and in mobile apps and content experiences and entertainment experiences has happened in that short time frame. And so as I look forward 10 years on TV, you can start seeing a similar disruption happening because, you know, just a few months ago, Apple introduced tvOS, which opens the living room up to basically development of apps, and anybody can build a living room experience for the first time. And so when we look at it as a tremendous opportunity, not just to expand our distribution, right, which is sort of the first stage of what we were doing. We were basically taking content that was sort of locked in your TV set, in your living room, and we were making it available on your computer, we were making it available on your mobile device, and ultimately making it available in an OTT way, right? Now I think we're gonna look at these technologies and say, all right, distribution is one thing, but how do they actually augment what we're trying to do from a storytelling standpoint? How do they make the content more interesting for kids, for telling compelling news stories? That's going to be the focus going forward. Mm-hmm. And the thing that gets me really excited, and you talked about the appification of television, is this bundled experience. Whereas before it has been primarily a vessel to deliver our TV content, now becomes a much richer entertainment experience.
And does it have, you know, I imagine that kids are engaging with this content in a much greater way than maybe some adults who that's just not what they're used to. And it would seem that kids are really open because they're so used to just
Yeah.
interacting with a device.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I actually have an 18-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old daughter, and so I've seen sort of the millennial and how digitally native she is. And then my 4-year-old, which is just a completely different level, where she expects everything to be touch, right? And we are starting to figure out how to use touch and some of these more immersive technologies to create better content, more engaging content, stuff that the kids, you know, expect to see. We have a product called appisodes in the App Store where we basically merge a traditional television program with some gaming elements, and it's very natural for the kids to do it that way.
So it must be fascinating for you to see your 4-year-old engage
Absolutely.
in a completely different way. Does that help drive your thought process at all?
It absolutely does, right? It keeps me really, really honest, right? And my job is looking at the consumer side of our business and the consumer technology side of our business. And every day she makes sure that I'm basically grounded in the reality of how kids are using it today versus what sort of I think that they're doing, right? And so it's like having I have a usability panel at home, right?
So, and I have to ask you, you know, because I always love asking people who work in this industry, and I know everyone has the same question, how much screen time do you allow a 4-year-old? I mean, you see this as a very valuable tool, but there's still the whole screen time for younger kids issue.
Yeah, and that sort of varies, right? And you know, we use it, you know, quite frankly, as a reward, right? And she gets to, you know, spend time with watching, you know, her favorite content, you know, Disney Junior content on the app. And the really nice thing about it is that she is completely self-sufficient during that time. Even at the age of 4, she knows exactly how to use those devices. She knows exactly how to access it, right? And quite frankly, it's sort of it's sort of like a digital nanny for us. Like if we need to go like cook, right, or something like that, we say, okay, here you go. And
Here you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing. All right, Dan, I want to bring you into the conversation because
I'm having these beautiful flashbacks to my 6-year-old and my 2-year-old right now dealing with these two.
Yeah.
And so what do you do?
Well, it's amazing the way that my 2-year-old functions with it versus my 6-year-old. It's almost like an entirely different generation.
Wow.
He uses it more for reading. He reads a lot of his books on it. There's like that Epics app that he reads books on, and he really only uses it to watch TV. So when it's time to watch TV, he'll watch something on it. Other than that, he doesn't really care for it. Doesn't really play a lot of games. My daughter, on the other hand, all she wants to do is play on it. Doesn't matter what it is. She'll go into the NASDAQ app and just stare at it. As long as it's open, she doesn't care.
You hear that, app developers? So that's funny, you talk about watching TV on a device, right? So this is what kids are doing. This is what people are doing. They're using devices, not just a television set. So talk to us a little bit about ABC News VR and how that is now a way that people can consume news content.
So my background is actually in documentary filmmaking. So coming over to ABC News was really just an opportunity to tell broader stories. And I was someone who needed to be convinced that VR was a storytelling tool because I come from a very traditional edit, reverse shot, things like that background. And only when I started speaking to our producers in-house that were really bullish about this content did I realize we were at a point that was, to go all the way back and date myself as a film geek, like the Lumiere brothers, when they could roll back film and they can tape one side of the lens and then they could have people talk to each other. Or the example that I like to use was, because we're in a digital age, it reminds me of when I saw IMAX film for the first time. You would have to go to the museum and see planes flying, and it felt like you were there, and then 10 years later, Christopher Nolan was using it in Batman. We're in a digital age, so that 10 years has sort of been truncated. And we're having conversations about how you tell stories in the VR space in the same way that any filmmaker that I've ever worked with has talked about Final Cut Pro or a Red camera. And it's really just a question of, well, what is the narrative? It's rooted in the story. So we use this tool, this VR tool, as a way to accomplish our goal, a narrative goal. So if it's bringing you inside Syria, a place you've never been before and probably will never go, that experience that we provide to you better be a tour of Syria. You better take the iPhone off and feel like you were there, feel like you've met somebody there, or you relate with an experience there. So for us, we refer to it a lot, and I've heard other people refer to it as an empathy machine. For us, it's really about taking that next level of storytelling and information and journalism and applying it all together to be like, well, now I actually understand Syria a little bit better, or North Korea, or New York during holiday time.
And that's something that you can't get from the evening news.
Well, the evening news is, restricted is probably the right word, by 30 minutes. And listen, as a news organization, we have to report, we have to inform. The way that we think of it from the digital side, because we are not held into an hour block, 30-minute block, if it's news, we need to inform. We need to tell the story, we need to be right, we need to be accurate, we need to be the bedrock of what ABC News is, have the journalistic integrity. But as storytellers, we need to infuse it with emotion. But once that story progresses a little bit, and it may not be front page of the New York Times or top of the Twitter queue, our jobs are to still take those relevant stories and have emotion be first, and use those other instances, those stories, as a framing device to tell human stories. And VR is a fantastic way to do that, which is the Syria one came out right around the time that that story was beginning to not die out, but not be the top of the top of the news day. And we were able to sort of infuse it with, you know about what's going on in Syria, now let us find this angle to it, which is ISIS trying to destroy the antiquities, the history of the country. That's something you can relate to. And we use that as a nice entry point in.
So I'm really curious, so how many of you watch the TV evening news anymore on a television? Okay.
Thank you.
Wow. And how many of you have actually used virtual reality in some way to see something else?
Also, thank you.
Oh, yeah, okay. So it sounds like a good combination, right?
Yeah, listen, we live in an age where brands and information they are platform agnostic. The same people that watch David on TV might not be the same people that are consuming the World News brand digitally. And we need to service them all.
Right. And isn't it also, I mean, and we see this here at CES in so many different ways, content is content. It no longer matters whether it's on TV or on the radio or on your iPad or your phone or wherever, it's content. And people want to consume it whenever they want to and have choices. So it sounds like you're giving people an option to enhance or augment, so to speak, what they're getting, and also for you, an entertainment to really just be entertained when you want to and where you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's such an interesting time, right? Because, you know, we're doing this with news. We're taking the camera, like you said. It's sort of like the early days of television, the early days of filmmaking. We're sort of making it up as we go along, right? And the same thing is going to happen with entertainment when it comes to these new mediums. You know, scripted television, how does that fit in? You know, does it fit in? You know, we don't know, but we're sort of venturing to find out, right?
How do you envision your, I don't even know if audience is the right word, your end user, your consumer, how do you envision them using the tools that you're developing?
It's interesting you said that, because we came up with another crazy idea, not necessarily for VR, yesterday, and someone on our team asked that exact same question. And I'm actually going to answer that similar to what you said, and it just shows how, I mean, not to do the whole mouse thing, but how really great the Disney company is. I firmly believe that people don't know what they want until we give it to them. We want people thinking of the craziest ideas because that then, literally, I worked on 30 for 30. No one knew that they wanted that until we gave that to them. Luckily, they liked it, and luckily it was good. But the whole, to me, the audience is, as long as the quality is good and the storytelling is solid, and you're finding a way to distribute it to whomever can consume it, I think the audience will define itself. That's my belief. I want to be the high-class French restaurant in a town that has 4 Italian restaurants. I want to be the alternate option, but the best food possible.
And I think, you know, and it's important that we make headway on this, right? Because there's only so many VR demos that you can sort of take before you sort of asking, well, what's next, right? I want to use this, you know, and get some meaningful, you know, storytelling through the devices. And so, so we're starting to experiment with that more and more. And I think it's important for the medium to have that sort of professional organizations now getting into it, right?
So how would you define this for content creators? I mean, there's a ton of content creators here. How do you kind of define this, and what would you say to people who want to get into this field to kind of do what they're doing and provide content in a different way across platforms using virtual reality?
Well, to me, it's what's the kernel? What are you telling? What's the story? We don't evaluate things based off of what's the next cool VR we're going to do. We try to find what's the next story we want to do, and then use the tools at our disposal to tell it. We could have very easily chose to do Syria as just a short documentary, and sometimes a short documentary is what's necessary. Sometimes interactive videos, sometimes live streams, sometimes infographics. It's what's the best story. So I say start from a narrative and emotional human condition standpoint first, and then find the right tool to tell it.
Skarpi?
Yeah, I think, you know, this industry is evolving so quickly, right? And, you know, television, with the emerging devices, with the sort of escalating, you know, power of the devices, the cloud processing, the cheaper processors and the price points coming down, is that, you know, software is playing more and more of a role in what the television experience is. And I think, you know, we welcome that sort of innovation of how do you take, you know, software, the power of these devices, and a good content idea, and present something new and innovative. And don't be afraid to go there, right? And experiment with that.
Well, and we were talking before, you know, it sounds like you try a lot of things and see what sticks. And you can't be afraid to fail with that.
Correct.
Exactly, yeah. You've got to learn by doing, right? There's no focus grouping your way out of that, right? You have to do, and you have to learn, right? Absolutely.
And Skarpi said something which is interesting. It's almost impossible to overlook the power of the devices. When I was in film school, we always used to say the most powerful thing to do would be watch a horror movie in your living room, because it invades your space. And yes, there's a nice thing to a communal experience, but there is something really interesting about the device in which you always keep on you, that you use as your lifeblood in so many ways, and you opt into a piece of content. That is a much more intimate relationship, I believe, than sitting on your couch and pressing a button. It's different, but I think it's more intimate, and
I think
it's impossible to overlook.
I think for so many people, though, I mean, you're carrying a TV in your pocket.
Correct.
I mean, that's how people are watching videos.
You're carrying a lot of things in your pocket. Yeah.
Your computer, your TV, your life, your
Exactly.
organizer. Yeah. So where do you see this going right now?
Well, I'm still trying to figure that out, to be perfectly honest with you. Again, for me, I go by what is the best way to tell the story. We're evaluating various different ideas, and we'll figure out how. Where this is going is we're going to see different forms of storytelling pop up. It could be something that starts in VR and translates into an app, or it starts in an app and goes into an interactive video, it's all going to overlap. That's a really good dodge by me, by the way.
And for entertainment?
Yeah.
Well, I think, you know, specifically for kids, I think the definition of what Disney Channel is or Disney Junior is, you know, as we bring that content onto these devices and we start using the power of the devices to tell different types of stories, the definition of what TV is basically changes. And the expectation of what people can do, for example, with a living room device, right, like an Apple TV, is going to drastically change in the next 10 years, right? And it is, like I said that the apps that we have today, they're going to look nothing like the apps 10 years from now. Right now, it's really a vessel to take, like you said, TV off of the screen, put it in your pocket, or distribute it differently, and it's going to be around. It's going to be around storytelling. It's going to be around experiences in the future.
Great. I want to leave time for just a question or two. If anybody has any questions? Yes?
I can hear
Yes.
you.
My name is Adam. You seem to struggle to answer the question about how virtual reality can be used. You produce documentary films. Is there a piece of content you've produced in the past that if you had virtual reality as a tool to enhance your ability to tell that story really well?
That's a really good question. Wow, I wish I actually can give you a really good answer. I just would, yes. It's not something that we did at, actually I will give you an example of something that we did at ABC News. One of the first shorts that we did was on the smoke jumpers in California. And I think that the idea of tackling it as a short documentary was a very good idea. But there are moments within that documentary that we went with GoPro cameras on helmets and things like that, where I think that within the way that we presented that piece, the documentary could have been the bedrock of the narrative, but within that piece we could have used VR as a way not only with just 360 video on helmets or with 360 3D within the forests themselves. And given what what we've seen we're able to do, I think that would have really heightened the experience to really show intimately what these guys were doing on the ground. And just, it's not that I struggled to answer it, it's that I come from a place where I wait for the creative to tell me what the next thing is. My job as a producer is to be a facilitator. I went to film school and realized I was a terrible filmmaker, but I was a great fan. And my job is to facilitate creativity. So for me, I'm always looking for the next great idea. So it's not, I don't want to be the one to dictate it. I want the creatives to come to me. But as to answer specifically your question, it's definitely the smoke jumpers. But we did a 30 for 30 on the Hawaiian, which is Eddie Cow, that I would have loved to have put a VR camera on a surfboard. That would have been awesome.
Renee?
Has the success of Disney Infinity and the fact that in the toy box all the characters can play together and it crosses over worlds, has that affected the way other divisions of Disney and ABC are looking at meshing things together?
I mean, I can't really speak for the creative side of the house. I know it's a concept that's really appealing and fun, right? And I know they're always working on different ways to sort of bring the characters to life. But I'm not aware of anything that's in the pipeline. But whether it's being discussed or not, I can only imagine it is. But yeah.
It's like you're getting a real cross-pollination across all the quadrants. People with kids, people without kids, boys,
Yeah.
girls, men, women. Like everybody's like playing with the Disney Infinity and the toy box. And it just seems like you're bringing more people
Yeah.
into the Disney family.
And it's sort of an example of like sort of different types of storytelling and different types of interactions with our characters, right? And there's something really interesting there, yeah.
I don't want to go over because the afternoon hostess will get mad, and that's me. And as a former radio producer, I never go over. So Dan and Skarpi, thank you very much. And also, they were kind enough to bring a box of Google Cardboard so you can all experience ABC News VR for yourself. They're in the back of the room, so if anybody would like one, somebody.
You get a cardboard.
So you get
a cardboard. You get a cardboard.
So somebody will be handing them out, so please help yourself to one Google Cardboard. And Dan and Skarpi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, thank you.